Not all clients are created equal. Sometimes they're going to want a familiar remote without all the bells and whistles. For those installations, RTI has you covered with the T1B Plus. In this video, we'll show you how easy it is to program, engrave, and deploy. Let's get started. After launching Integration Designer, let's start a new project. Select File, New System. Navigate to where you want to store your client file. We'll call this T1B Plus Tutorial and select Save. The Add Workspace item will pop up, allowing us to add all the building blocks to our project. Let's start with a main processor. I'm going to select the XP6S and I'm going to select Add Processor. Notice the processor has been added to the workspace. Next, we're going to add the rooms to our project that we're going to control. We're going to add one room called the Family Room and select Add Room. Now that the Family Room is added, let's add the T1B Plus using the Controller tab. I'm going to search for T1B Plus, and you're going to notice that there's two T1B Plus. There's the regular controller, and that is the controller mode version. And there's one that can be put into companion mode. So it's the same remote that can be put in two different modes. Controller mode is the more common mode where it's going to be independent. With companion mode, it's going to mirror any app-based control. So if you have an iOS or Android phone or tablet, it will mirror the movements of those devices. So you could pick up the remote halfway through your session with your iPad or Android device, and your remote will know where you are. Likewise, when you select something on your remote, the app will also move to that device. So they'll stay in sync with each other. I don't have any app-based control in this project, so I'm going to put the T1B Plus in controller mode. And I'm going to add that to my family room. Select Next, and we're going to give this a name, T1B Plus Family Room. And now where it wants you to create a page for the weather source that was included and a home page, I'm going to untick both of these options. The T1B Plus doesn't have a touchscreen, so we won't be able to see any weather statistics. And a home page is not really needed, since the buttons are only going to reflect the source selection. So let's add the room, add the device without any pages for now. Now that the controller has been added without any pages, let's add the devices to our project. I'm going to start with the first device, a television. I'm going to go to the driver tab for this one, and I'm going to look for the Sony Google TV driver. I'm going to select it, and I'm going to add it to the family room. Select Next. Now where it says Set as Room Audio Source, this will punch the volume through to the sources in this room using the TV volume up, down, and mute commands. If you have a receiver or another device, you're going to want to untick that, as the TV will not be the room's audio source. So let's give this a name, and we'll keep the source name and driver name in sync. Let's call this TV Family Room. Now over here on the right side, the software will give you a page if you leave this ticked for the television. That's going to come in handy with smart TV or something like that. We'll leave the page ticked, even though we're going to add some media streamers to the room. We'll leave it ticked for an activity. And let's select Add Device. Now we're going to add our receiver to the project file. I'm going to go look for a Denon AVR. And I'm going to add that Denon AVR. I'm going to open up the plus signs, and I'm going to add Zone 1 to the family room, or the main zone. Select Next. This time we'll use the Denon receiver as the room's audio source. That will punch the volume through to the rest of the sources in the family room. And we'll keep the driver name and source name in sync, and we'll call this AVR Family Room. No page is needed for the receiver, so I'll untick the page for the T1B Plus. Select Add Device. Now we're ready to add the sources to our workspace. I'm going to start with a DirecTV box. So I'm going to search for DirecTV. Here I'll open up the plus sign, and you can see that this driver has multiple instances. Up to 24 DirecTVs can be controlled with a single driver. I'm going to add Tuner 1 to the family room, select Next, and I'm going to name this DirecTV Family Room. And I'm going to leave that page ticked as well, so we could have a control page on the T1B Plus. Select Add Device. Next, we're going to add our next source. We're going to look for a Roku. So I'm going to look for Roku, and this driver also has multiple instances, and I'm going to add player 1 to the family room. And again, I'm going to give this a more logical name, Roku Family Room, and I'm going to add that page on our T1B Plus. Now I'm going to skip over to the infrared tab, and I'm going to add an Apple TV. I know that's overkill, but we're going to fill up this remote with sources. Add the Apple TV, select the family room, select Next. Now, because this is an infrared device, we're going to set an output port in the drop-down menu. I'm going to pick port 1 to fire out those infrared commands. And let's name this Apple TV Family Room. And we'll create a page as well. Next, I'm going to add a NVIDIA Shield as well. So I'm going to look for NVIDIA Shield, find it, add that to the family room, select Next, and we're going to define another port. As you can see, the first port's been named for us. Let's select port 2, and I'm going to call this Android TV Family Room, and we'll create a page for that as well. I'm going to finish off with a Sony Blu-ray. We'll go with most models, add to the family room, select Next, pick an IR port, and let's give this a more user-friendly name. Okay, that's good enough for our sources. Let's click Close and move on to the next step in the project file. The next step in the project is to survey our workspace. We want to go through here and make sure that everything has been named correctly, placed correctly, and everything looks good. This is the time where you want to make any changes necessary. So as we can see, we have our source devices, our drivers, and I'm just going to go down here and make sure everything looks good. I could bring my homepage up top and just make sure everything looks good, and it does. Next, we're going to configure the system properties of the project. So I'm going to select File, then I'm going to select System Properties. Now over here, I'm just going to be interested in going over to the location and setting my location. I'm going to select the United States, and then I'm going to select a city from the drop-down. I'm going to select New York, New York from the drop-down menu. So I'm going to search, find it. You could also enter in your latitude or longitude if your city and state does not appear in the list. Now, I'm going to go now and go to the clock tab, and I'm going to set the Eastern time zone, which is already set. Now the T1B Plus is a Zigbee remote, or it can use radio frequency using a 433 megahertz antenna, or it could send out IR line of sight. Our project, we're going to use Zigbee, so we don't need to fill out an 802.11 tab unless we have a Wi-Fi remote in the project. Since we don't, I'm going to skip that option and click OK. Next, I'm going to configure the properties in the workspace, and I'm going to start with the processor. I'm going to click Properties, and I'm just going to go through these processor tabs and make sure everything looks good. I'm going to preserve the flag and relay states, simply because I always do. And I'm just going to go through here and configure whatever I need. All I need to worry about here is the wired network in case I need control there, any kind of IR pass-through, which I'm not using, and so on. So there's really not much to do here. I could click OK and move on. Next, I'm going to configure the driver properties. So I'm going to start with my AVR. Here I could decide how I'm going to be controlling my receiver in this case. So I'm going to use that network IP control, but I'm going to use a static IP address. And I'm going to enter in this static address for my receiver. That should be all I need. Then I'm going to move on to my DirecTV. And I'm going to enter in the name of the DirecTV, and I'm going to decide whether it's a standard or client. It's a standard, and I'm going to enter in the IP address of my DirecTV. That's all I need. I'll leave Get Receiver Feedback checked, even though I really don't need it in this case. And I'm going to move on to Roku. Now, Roku can be controlled with IP as well, and that could be used using a serial number or IP address. I'll leave it on the IP address and name the Roku Family Room, and I'll give the Roku an IP address as well. There's really no need to configure these fixed channels. The Roku can launch the channels by name using the driver, so this step is kind of redundant. I'm going to move on to the TV. Now all the TV needs is an IP address. The port name doesn't need to be changed. So I'm going to enter in the IP address of my television. Next, I'm going to move to the weather, and even though I'm not going to show or display the weather, it's a good habit to get into and just configure this in case you add another remote later on that would require the weather. So I'm just going to enter in a zip code, 10013, and I'm going to now move on to the T1B Plus. Now you're going to select the T1B Plus, then select Properties in the configuration window. Now, when you're programming a T1B Plus, the properties are really important because they're going to drive a lot of the functionality that you're going to use with the T1B Plus. Okay? First thing I'm going to do is set the power down time to a greater value. I don't want it to power or go dim on me after 10 seconds, so I'm going to make this more like 45 seconds. And the battery life is real good, so we won't impact it. Under backlight, you'll go and make your changes to whatever your backlight level is. I'll leave it on 100%. Now under output, here's where you have the option to set how the remote is going to communicate with the processor. Currently, it's set to send two-way trigger codes to the control processor using the transport method below, Zigbee. Okay, and that's what we're going to use, but I want to review the other options. You could, if you want to use one-way control, you could select one-way, and down here you can disable two-way control. If you use one-way, you will need an RM433 433 megahertz antenna, but we're going to be using two-way trigger codes and Zigbee in our case. There's also IR trigger codes, which are kind of archaic. We're not going to go into IR trigger codes, but they're a way of sending out infrared commands that can send out macros that run on the processor. Those are used for really hostile environments. We're just going to leave this on two-way trigger codes and make sure our two-way options is set to Zigbee. Now you're going to want to run a Zigbee antenna off of your XP6S, and you're going to want to make sure that it's in range of your T1B Plus. Let's move on to key labels. Now here's where you're going to label your source keys. The T1B Plus has 8 activity buttons on top, 2 rows of 4 for a total of 8 buttons that you can use for activities. And it also has 4 anything keys that you could use for functions within your source devices. So I'm going to go and name the source keys as close as I can to the activities in my list. Now the first activity I want is my DirecTV. I'm not sure we have a DirecTV, so I'm going to look for a satellite. If I hit the letter S, it should take me right down to the letter S, and I'm going to hit SAT. We can engrave these keys using our Laser Shark service. So these source keys, even though we want to get as close as we can, it really isn't too important what we name these. Now the second activity is going to be my Roku. I don't think I have a Roku button either, so I'm going to go and name this Media Player. So I'm going to look for that Media Player or Media or something like that. I'll leave it on Media Center. That will be my Roku. Now the third one will be my Apple TV. I think we have that one, and here it is. So that one's named properly. Not that the names really matter. And now the fourth one is going to be my NVIDIA Shield Android TV. Again, I don't really have an Android TV either, so I'll just call this AUX for my Android TV. These are just placeholder labels, so you really don't have to worry too much about your labels being exact. You're going to want to engrave these or use the rubber keycaps that come with the actual remote. And now number 5, that's going to be my Blu-ray, so I'll set that to Blu-ray. And then 6 is going to be our TV. So I'm going to hit the letter T, and I'm going to select TV. That'll be my smart TV function. And you can see I have two extra activities on number 7 and 8, and we'll leave those blank for now. We could always add activities later on, And I think I covered everything. Yes, I've covered everything I need. Okay. Now, as far as the extra keys go, we'll leave those as is for now. I'm fine with A, B, C, D, and we can always name them if we have good ideas later on. It would have to be a common function between each source. So we'll leave these as is now. And if we come up with something later, we can set them to whatever command we want. Typically, these would be used for functions that aren't on the hard buttons that you'll need for your source device. All right, now we're going to move on to the most important tab in this whole properties function, the source setup. This is going to drive the pages. So you're going to point each source at the proper source that you assign to the button using the code sets you specified. So I'm going to select the first activity. Now, since this is the DirecTV, I'm going to point it at the DirecTV code set. For the second activity, that was my Roku. So I'm going to point it to the Roku that I added to the workspace. Now it knows how to assign these source keys to the actual device. For number 3, that we used an Apple TV. Number 4, that's what we use for our Android TV. And number 5, that was our Blu-ray player. And then number 6 was our television. Okay? So you're going to want to do this. This is absolutely mandatory. The next 2 tabs we don't have to worry about. And I'm going to click OK. Now that we've configured the workspace properties, let's go and program and configure our activities in the family room. Select the family room, then select activities. Here are all the activities in the family room. Since all of the activity macros are going to be centralized, the first thing we need to do is configure all of the source devices and figure out if these are activities or not. Is weather an activity? No. Let's untick that. What about the TV? Yes. DirecTV, Roku, Apple, Android, Blu-ray, those are all activities. So we'll leave those checked. The rest can be unticked, and that's all we need to do. Then we need to set the correct source type. Notice that all of these sources are video sources. So that is correct. We don't need to change them. There are 3 different source types though: video, audio, and other. Since we only have video, the software gets them properly and we don't need to change anything. Let's click OK and move on to the last column. Now here's where we could sort our activities and rename them. Now, theoretically, you don't need to do that with the T1B Plus, but I recommend doing it anyway in case you add another type of remote later on. You don't have to revisit this. So I'm going to move my DirecTV up to the top, move my TV to the bottom, just like the order of the buttons. Roku, Apple, Android, Blu-ray, TV. That looks just like the list we did. And now I'm just going to name these as I would on a normal remote. Watch DirecTV, watch Roku, watch Apple TV, watch Android TV, watch Blu-ray, and we'll call this Watch Smart TV or Watch TV, whatever you like. Now again, you don't really need to do this for a T1B Plus, but this is a good habit to get into so that when you add a controller later on, maybe to another room or to another area, you're going to want to, you don't want to come back to this and reconfigure these. So now you're done. You don't have to worry about it. Now, once these are configured, we're now ready to program them. So let's select the first activity. Let's pull our macro window up and let's program our selection events. These are going to run in the order in which you see them when we select Watch DirecTV. The first thing it's going to want to run is a please wait page. And this is going to run the first thing it's going to run. And again, we only have to program this once in this room, but we don't have a please wait page. So I'm going to skip it. Under room on, this run turns on any devices that both audio and video share, like an AV receiver. And even though I don't have any audio, I'm going to turn on the receiver with this step in case I add an audio CD player or something like that later on. So I'm going to go to my macro steps, bring in my command, select my AVR, and I'm going to select my main zone on command. Now, if your receiver lead needs a little delay, bring in a time delay, and I'll set this to 1.5 seconds. Next, video on will run, and this turns on video specific equipment only. So technically we could have turned on our TV and receiver all in this step, but it doesn't really matter since we don't have any audio anyway. So we're going to turn on our TV in this step. So bring in a command, select your TV from the drop-down, select your power on function. If your TV needs a delay, go to your time delay and set the appropriate time delay. I'll leave it on 2.5 seconds. Now under power on source, this is going to turn on your DirecTV or whatever source you're using for your activity. In this case, it's a DirecTV activity. So we're going to bring in the DirecTV power on command. DirecTV, device state keys. We're going to select our DirecTV and we're going to select the right power argument on. And there's a press and release, which we'll leave as is. Okay? Now, activity selected will switch your inputs on whatever devices need switching. In this case, our AVR and TV. So I'm going to bring in a command, and I'm going to switch my AVR first. Let's select our source select input source, and I'm going to set my source on my Denon to SAT cable. Then I'm going to bring in another command, and I'm going to set my TV, IR emulated command source commands. HDMI 1's fine. If you need a little delay between them, let's do a 0.3 of a second delay between those commands. Activity ready? Well, that'll jump to your DirecTV. Now, here's the situation. When you're programming the T1B Plus in controller mode versus companion mode, when you're doing controller mode, this will not work, this page link. Just keep that in mind. It'll only work in companion mode. So you have to add the page link manually to the button as well when we go to the interface. We'll do that later, but these are programmed for you anyway. Okay? But now we have to program our deselection events. Room off start will run when we turn off the room. Since room off start's used for a please wait page and we don't have one, we'll skip it. Activity deselected, that's one of those rarely used steps that's there if you need it. So I'm going to skip that as well. Power off source will do the opposite of power on source. So I'll just copy the power on source, paste it into the power off source, and just change the argument to off. Video off will turn off our TV or do the opposite of video on. So I'll copy this command, paste it into video off, and then just turn our TV off. Room off is the opposite of room on, so I'll copy the room on, paste it into room off, and change our argument. Room off complete isn't really needed for this remote, but it will return the remote to some kind of a home page in normal use. However, the T1B Plus doesn't really need to do that, so we'll leave this as is and it won't really do anything for us. All right, let's move on to the next one. Roku. Activity start, nothing is needed. Room on and video on are already done. The Roku doesn't need to power on. And for the input switching, I'm going to go back to the DirecTV and borrow these commands. I'm going to hold down the Shift key and copy those input switching, go back to my Roku, select the input switching activity selected, and paste, and then just change my arguments. I'm going to change this SAT cable to media player, and I'll leave the HDMI 1 as is. Activity ready is done for us, but we still need to program that page link manually on the controller. Room off start, we don't need, neither do we need activity deselected. Power off source, since our Roku doesn't have to turn off, but we want to prevent the client from streaming it, and while the system is off, let's put a safeguard on a workaround to kind of return the Roku to its home page instead of a power off. So I'm going to bring in a command, select my Roku from the dropdown, and then I'm going to select keys from the list of commands. These are all the keys that are on the remote control that you buy with the Roku. And I'm going to leave this on the home key. That way, when the client turns off the system, the Roku returns to the home page and doesn't stream continuously while the system's off. Video off is done. Room off is done. Room off complete is done but not needed. And we're ready to move on to Apple. With Apple, it's the same drill. Room on is done. Video on is done. The only thing we need to do is activities selected. Let's see if I paste those in. They're still there. I'm just going to change this to aux. I'll use aux1 and leave it on that. Activity ready. Room off start is not needed. Activity deselected is not needed. Power off source. Let's do the same thing with the Apple TV, just in case the client's streaming when he turns the system off. Select your Apple, and we'll just select menu home from the list of commands. That will return the Apple to the home page, or at least its home page when its system is turned off. Video off, and room off complete are done. For the Android, we do need to program a power on and off. So let's bring in our power on, select the letter P, and then scroll down to your power commands. Power on, activity selected, let's paste and change the input. This time we'll use DVD and leave it on that. Now, for the other side of the coin, the only thing we have to worry about is the power off source. So let's bring in a command again, select the Android, and this time power off. Video off, room off is done. For the Blu-ray, we have to power off on the Blu-ray. So let's bring in a command, select the Blu-ray, power on. For this selected activity, well, we still have those contents copied into the clipboard. So let's paste it and then just change this to BD for the Blu-ray. And then for the power off source, just bring in another command for the Blu-ray. This time we want to turn it off. Last but not least, our TV. Our TV isn't really needed for power on source and power off source because video on will take care of turning it on. Now, as far as the activities selected, it all depends how you have your smart TV set up. So I'm going to bring in and paste in those commands, and I'm going to set my receiver to that input that I set the audio return channel to, TV. And then instead of setting it to an input on HDMI 1, I'm going to leave this as is. I'm going to bring in a menu command. So I'm going to go to my navigation commands, and I'll make it go to the TV home. That way the TV shows a home menu of apps. Okay? And again, you don't need to worry about power off source because video off will take care of turning off the TV. Okay? And that's all you need to do for the activities. Now, when we come back, we're going to configure the pages on our controller. Since the activities are done, all we have to do is configure our pages, and then we have to put those page links on. So we'll come back and do that. Let's select the T1B Plus from the workspace. And I'm going to pull down my macro window since we really don't need all that space anymore. Notice that on the T1B Plus controller view, we can see all the sources that were created. I'm going to start with my DirecTV. Actually, I could start from anything. Home doesn't have a page. Android has a page. What I'd like to do to name these properly is to right-click and edit page title. That will take you right to the source name that we designated under the key labels. I'm just going to click OK, and it will name that properly. And I'm going to go to the rest of my activities, edit page title, click OK, click on the AVR. There's no page there, so no need to do anything. Blu-ray, which is source 5, we want to name that Blu-ray. DirecTV, right-click, edit page title. It should stick at the key label and click OK. For the Roku, right-click, edit page title, click OK. And let's do the same for the TV. Right-click, edit page title, and that looks like it's named for us, so that's fine. Now, once you finish doing that, we're going to start with the first button, which is DirecTV. If I click on the DirecTV and then click on this first button here, notice that this has been programmed with the correct tag and the correct command that will run the System Manager activity. The only thing we need to do for our activities is do a hard page link on them. When your controller is in controller mode, it won't run those System Manager page links. So we're going to go down to the page link for each activity and make this jump to the right activity. This will jump to our DirecTV, and first page is fine. The second one is going to jump to our Apple TV or Roku. So we're going to aim that at the Roku first page. Then the third one, that's our Apple TV. And the fourth one, that's our Android. Let me open this up a little more. And I'm going to aim that at the Android page. And this guy is the Blu-ray. So let's select the Blu-ray page jump. And then finally, our TV. Okay? That's all you need to do. Now, you can program these commands here. It depends on what you want to program them with. And that's a call that's up to you. So what you can do is go to the tag browser and then go find some devices like the DirecTV and then look for some things that you might want to include. Maybe the DVR. So maybe I'll put that on this function right here. And then A would be a list function. Let's see if we have list. I don't know if we have list, but I'm going to go for DVR. Okay? And that will be DVR. Okay? And you'll just go through here and figure out what functions you want to include. I'm using the DirecTV because it's the most used source. Okay? But you could look at the Roku and see if there's any commands. Maybe a back command might be good. We really I don't think we have a back command. So maybe we'll make this second button a back command. It's completely up to you. You could either go in and type in the tag name or you can drag and drop it. I'm just going to type in the tag name back and you can see this already inherited the command. And now every device will use a back button. And the ones that don't have a back button, even the Roku, will have. So what you have to do if you want these to carry over to your other sources, you'll have to right click on this and add that tag to all your pages. So every device gets that tag, not just your DirecTV. I'll do the same with this. And now if I look at the Roku, this has those tags, but there's no command that have been mapped, which is fine. Okay. So you'll decide whatever commands you want to use here. Just make sure you label these correctly. I don't think we have a back, but we'll engrave those. And that's how you program the T1B Plus. Now, the last thing you have to do when programming a T1 Plus is get those buttons engraved if you want. Giving the client rubber keycaps might be fine, but if you really want to step it up a little bit and make it more elegant, I would go with the engraving. And you could engrave text or images if you like. I recommend engraving text on a keycap this small, but on the KP2, 4, and 8, you could do text and images. So we're going to come back and show you how to configure this in LaserShark. RTI features a laser engraving service called LaserShark. Buttons on customizable remotes can be engraved by RTI and sent out to RTI dealers. Dealers configure the button sets using LaserShark software. To get information on LaserShark and to access the software, log into the dealer site, select Resources, then select Custom Engraving LaserShark. This will take you to the LaserShark page where you'll get all the information on purchasing, on how it works, the delivery and purchase software and order emails. And so you're going to download this software, install it, and you're going to purchase the LaserShark code by sending an email to orders@avproglobal.com. They're going to give you a specialized code depending on what you're ordering. Here's an example of a code. I'll just copy this. And I'm going to now go into the LaserShark software. The first thing you're going to do once you launch the software is fill out all of your information here on the right side. You're going to enter in your order code. Not sure if that'll work, but I'll enter it in. And it gives you the information on the bottom, how it needs to be formatted. And you're going to receive that code after you get in touch with that email address and tell them what you need. Now we're going to go and create a new button set. we're going to select the T1B Plus from the list of remotes. Here you can see all the remotes we support the custom engraving for. And I'm going to select the T1B Plus, and I'm presented with this label set. So we give you tons of different labels here, and 32 to be exact. So you'll have more for next time. And you're going to just configure these using this entry here on the right side. So the first thing you're going to do is select a button color. This T1B Plus only comes in black, so that option is not available. You're going to select your quantity for how many sheets you want to order. I'm just going to set this to 1 sheet. Now, under content type, you have the ability to add text or images. I recommend adding text to the T1B Plus, but if you added images, you could navigate to a directory where you have images. I'll go to my desktop, I'll go to a folder where I have some brand names here, and I'll just search for a brand name like my Apple TV, and you could see how those images can be engraved. And if that works for you, you can keep it, but I do recommend using text for this particular remote. So I'm going to leave it on text. So we're going to set our first button label. I'm going to set this to Direct TV. I'll do it in caps. When I click outside it, you'll see that entry there. Now, I don't want to have it overlay that like that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the font size, at least for this button, to 5. And that looks like it fit perfectly. Okay. You could make it bold. You could select a different font. So I could select a font. You could experiment with different fonts in this list here. I usually like to do the Montresot font or Roboto. Let's see here. Could do Roboto, medium. Let's see how that looks. That looks really good. I like that. Okay. So you'll set the right font size, and your buttons might differ depending on what text you're entering. Then you'll enter in your bold, italic font size, whether or not you want to underline it, whether or not you want to auto wrap the function. I recommend leaving that on false, but it's set to true here. The alignment of the button, if you want to shift it over the horizontal and vertical alignment, maybe you want it on top, maybe you want 2 rows of text. You'd have to make your font smaller, but maybe you want 2 rows of text. You can do that. And then on the bottom, this will inherit the information from the first screen. Make sure your order code is set appropriately. Otherwise, it's not going to work. Now you're going to go into the next button and you're going to enter in that function. I'll just enter in Roku, okay? And it will inherit the rest of the information, but maybe I'll make this one slightly bigger. That's too big, so I'll make it, that looks better. Whatever you need to do to make them look even, I'll leave it at 5. And you'll just go through here and just send your button, configure those button labels until you're finished. If you want to do mix and match an image, that's possible too. I'll select image for the third one, which is the Apple TV, and I'll find an image for the Apple TV that works. I'll use this Apple TV image here, okay? So you could do that if you like. These buttons are small, so if your client might have trouble seeing it, but it's up to you. So you could do a combination of buttons, text, all buttons, all text, it's up to you. Now, once you're finished configuring this and you've entered in your information, make sure that's entered in correctly and make sure your code is entered in. You're going to go and you're going to export your order. And that tells me my code's not valid, so that's fine. But it will spit out a file and you will send that to RTI. I recommended saving your file. It'll save it as an LSD file. I'll call this Laser Shark. And you're going to want to send that file to that email address available on that website. Now, if you get in trouble and you want some more information, there's a help tab in the software as well, and that'll give you some information as well. I do recommend the website for more up-to-date information, and this just tells you about all the different sections and how to place an order, how to copy and paste buttons, and so on. And that's the process. So you'll go through here and you configure all your buttons, For the time being, you'll give your client the rubber keycaps that come with the buttons. You can cut them out with a razor knife and insert them in pretty easily. And that's how you configure and engrave a T1B Plus. If you have any questions, please get in touch with us. Hopefully you liked that webinar and you're interested in the T1B Plus for your next project. We'll see you soon. Thanks for watching.